Welcome everyone. We'll just wait for everyone else to get settled. There's a good attendance, I think. I've been told by Liz. So we'll just give those time to get logged in, and then we'll start just past 8 o'clock. So thanks again those that are online now. We'll give it a few minutes. So if you want to grab yourself very quickly a hot drink, a cold drink, any pads of paper, then now is the time, or a quick pit stop before we start just after 8 o'clock. So again, don't worry if you just logged in. It's not silent for any other reason, and we're just waiting for just past 8 o'clock to start. So a few more people just log in. And I've been told with most of the Welsh Athletics webinars that come the actual time check, a lot of people rushing through the door at the exact time it was set to start. So we'll give it a couple of minutes or so. So as I said, grab any snacks you need, any comforters for the presentation, and we'll wait for the final few people to get their tickets checked at the door and make their way to their seats. So again, welcome, the last of the welcome messages before we start. So we'll just give it another minute or so just for those that are still logging in, finding their login, get themselves settled on this Thursday evening, and then we'll get the presentation underway. Great numbers so far. Good to see a huge amount of attendees. I'm sure all my friends and family, so or the coaching world of Welsh Athletics and beyond. So a minute or so, and then we will get started. For those that those coaches I know that were unable to make it tonight, we are recording it, so that will be on the Welsh Athletics platform as well. So about a minute, and we will get ourselves underway. So we have hit just past 8 o'clock. It is Thursday, the 24th of September. Delighted to be part of another Welsh Athletics webinar. Back in April, I had the privilege of delivering one on 10K training. It seems a long time ago now. Even back then, we were hoping for things to have moved on a little bit more than they have done. So a strange old time. But those that don't know me, my name's James Thie. I'm Director of Athletics at Cardiff Met, former international runner, and now a coach to some GB internationals, including Jake Smith, who was selected today for the World Championship Half Marathon in a couple of weeks in Poland. As part of my role at Cardiff Met, I look after the teams there. But a couple of years ago, I was given the opportunity to start a talk doctorate in sports coaching. And from someone that didn't always see themselves from an academic background, I ended up doing a master's a couple of years ago at Cardiff Met, and then when the doctorate came to light, I thought it was a great opportunity. But since that last delivery in April, coaches up and down the UK, up and down the world, have battled and done a fantastic job. What I have been blown away by has been the results that athletes and coaches have put out there since the resurrection of the outdoor season. But again, equally, it hasn't quite gone to plan for everyone either. I think we've had in our own training group some great results, some middle results, and then things that haven't gone to plan. So hopefully in this presentation that we can touch upon some subjects that ourselves as coaches are kind of dealing with in the COVID-19 era now. The landscape back in April, we hoped we'd be back to normal, but it's actually proven itself that normal is no longer anything that we can kind of expect for the foreseeable future. So it'd be interesting in this presentation, hopefully some take home, some things that might help us develop. But to all those coaches that and athletes as well that have been dealing with all of the uncertainties over the last few months, my hat's off. And I think all of us are learning literally on our feet. I don't think there were many competitions, or there definitely wasn't a coaching manual written in the last pandemic 100 years ago. So we are making history, and we are learning literally on our feet. So my presentation tonight is part of my talk doctorate. Has been doing sections of courses where it breaks down the doctorate as opposed to the traditional PhD route, which is just a thesis. The talk doctorate allows us to work on individual modules, and it really allows us to get to some of the key elements that we can really start unpicking our coaching practice. And it is about us as coaches, putting into action theory and learning about the theory in our own practice. So the last module was action research for me, and it was doing a 5,000 word study, bit of research in action research. And I decided to look at my own coaching practice, but look at fostering creativity in endurance running coaches. So as an endurance running coach, I thought it was something that I really wanted to look at, but also how we interact as coaches, and how we end up shaping our own environment. So massive thanks obviously to Cardiff Met, massive thanks obviously to Welsh Athletics for allowing me to deliver this tonight, but also big thanks to the British Milers Club that have helped part fund my talk doctorate as well. So it's a big team out there, as any coaching network is. Even in my talk doctorate, it's a team, and again, hugely lucky and thankful to those coaches that I've worked with in this project, worked with and been influenced beforehand, but also the athletes as well, because any coach knows you're not a coach unless you have a group or you have athletes to work with. So let's have a look. Oh, I'm going to try, and where is that? Right, so technology, there we go. So aims and objective of my study originally. So aim and objective in the end was, it was really looking at fostering creativity in endurance running coaches, but it was with the vehicle of collaboration. Now we'll touch upon this as we go through today, and for a lot of us, collaboration is something that we do, but maybe we don't always do it to the fullest of our ability, and maybe sometimes it happens, or maybe sometimes it doesn't happen where it could happen. So the kind of aims and objectives of my original study was kind of deconstructing what is creativity. So what are creative ideas, what are current practices and practices that maybe I use and other coaches use in endurance running coaching. I wanted to explore collaborative creativity, what that looked like working with other coaches and how that worked in endurance running, but also then enhance looking at the external, internal factors of this collaborative creativity, basically how it could happen and how us as coaches could think about it happening. So what is creativity? Well, creativity is described as kind of an act, an idea, that kind of changes our kind of existing domain. You're looking to transform existing domains and develop. And I think that looking at the way that we kind of develop as coaches, looking at the way that we kind of look at the mark space, but also making sure, and I think it's really important that we kind of look at them being appropriate to what we're doing, and therefore it's something that's useful. So we can all have lots of creative ideas, but within this study, it was about the ideas that we actually put into practice. So as coaches, we're judged by results, we're judged by what we do. We can have all these great ideas in our heads, but unless we actually go and do something about it, use them, then they're just ideas. And so really it's getting that idea that actually creativity is actually being creative, as opposed to just thinking about being creative. It's as much about the action about what we do as coaches. So there were kind of myths and assumptions of why be creative. For me, one of the real important things of getting to be creative was, I often saw myself, or would have liked to have thought myself as being creative, but actually doing the talk doctorate and getting into the literature and talking to other coaches and academics, that it isn't an unstructured solo and just a maverick type of process that sometimes we kind of associate creativity with, but it's a lot more structured to it. It's working with people, and it's that collaboration again that we will come back to. So, and I think that it's something that we often think about. We can't be creative, or people are just born creative. Well, that's a kind of myth or assumption that that I want us to try and think about and challenge as we move through. So my desire was my own personal development. Hopefully that's why yourselves are here, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a coach. We're always looking to learn, always looking to upskill. That was my fundamental reason for starting to challenge my own idea of creativity, and think about how I could develop it. Literature basically widens the perception, but I think starting to look at creativity, when you really get at it, I think that all of us have probably, sort of enjoyed environments that have been, more creative, because we've learned more. If we do the same thing and everything is mundane, then we're probably less likely to learn, less likely to enjoy. And so getting at why we want to be creative as coaches, why we want athletes that want a creative environment, it helps the learning process of athletes and their enjoyment. And any one of us, hopefully as coaches, two things that would be fundamental. We want our athletes to learn and get better, but we also want them to enjoy the tasks. Now, some of our tasks that we do, that there can't be too much creativity, but there's other ways that we can challenge things that we think about, concepts that hopefully we can make them a little bit more creative. So as I said, I perceive myself as a creative coach, but probably realized that I wasn't maximizing myself, the resources around me. And so, yeah, how can I shape the environment that I'm in as a coach, and use and effectively kind of develop the resources around me in terms of other people. So it's that adaptation, that learning. And once you think that creativity is a tool and something we can use as coaches, then hopefully, like all of our kind of coaching tool book or tool bag, it's another way of developing us as coaches. So why collaboration? So that reading behind things that I just talked about, where if we start to think about creativity isn't just this lone wolf thing of one person is just creative on their own, that if we think about the more that we collaborate, the better and the more creative we are. So collaboration itself has historically looked at team sports, and that's a challenge from ourselves, maybe in athletics, where often it's an individual sport, but many of us coach in groups, many of us train or look after multiple people. So it's not as individual as you think, but in terms of historics, it has been looked at in team sports, and you only have to look at creativity in football, in rugby, in sports, where it's given more to the players, that kind of creativity, whereas we're starting to think about actually the collaboration now of the teams, but also that individual now, that we're talking about that collaboration probably between not just individuals in their sports in terms of the players, but we're definitely talking about the coaches and how coaches can collaborate. So a heavy portion of literature has been business and management and leadership, and that's something that's starting to change, and hopefully with different studies that are going on, that collaboration in coaches can actually become a little bit more of a forefront. And as we get in a little bit more in detail of this, it's a little wonder why there's not more information about kind of collaboration of coaches, being that that working with others, and there's a lot of similarities between the sports world, business world, leadership. It all kind of nicely underpins it and links in. So I think it's a concept that we should use. It's a concept that a lot of us use in everyday life, and therefore carrying it on into coaching makes, well, for me, really kind of good sense. So kind of looking at that, many studies into creativity best achieved in group situations, and that the internet interactions and dynamics are not just solo things, that they happen in groups. So all of us, I talked about earlier that the success or the plans that we all put into place that either went to plan or didn't go to plan. But my study started in terms of the construction pre-Christmas of 2019, and actually into 2020 at the start. That was when it was kind of finalized, and for data collection into February. Now we all know on the 23rd of March, or even before that, when measures were starting to come into place. But on 23rd of March, there was a controlled measure that actually gave us a bit of a unique situation. And in terms of a study, you probably won't find too many studies that every coach in the UK was put into the same scenario. Every training group was put into the same scenario where we weren't able to coach face to face. Coaches and athletes similarly were on lockdown, so we couldn't leave our houses, and so you had a controlled environment, a controlled kind of testing, participant and resources that made this study really unique, I think. So and again, we will kind of delve into that and how that kind of impacted the study itself. And so the days that preceded that, what we understood as coaches to have been our normal structure, whether it was evening training, whether it was facilities, what we planned in terms of competitions, that all went quickly out the window. So I kind of look back and think maybe we'll look back at this period as as being an interesting period that changed the way that we coach, definitely challenged our kind of heavy workload, but that often's been said by Santos and Morgan to create, and that's important to being creative. So it'd be interesting to see whether all of us that we were forced into being creative through COVID-19. So action research, why action research? Well, it's a system or a way of researching that is looking to improve practice. So it's a great vehicle for coaches because we're looking at improving practice, but because it works on a kind of plan, do, review, those teachers out there will recognize that it's about developing in cycles. It's what we do in training with planning. We plan something, we put it into action, we reflect on it, and then depending how it went, we develop it again, and we talk about what happened, we write down what happened, and that in a nutshell is what action research is. It's not just writing something down, you go and study it, and then you talk about it. It's an ongoing process. It's about changing and looking to change your environment. And for me, it was looking to develop my own personal kind of understanding and development of creativity, and also within the coaches around that transfer of knowledge and that transfer of understanding into the coaching world. So it can be applied to almost any setting, any task, any procedures where you're looking for solutions and you're looking for more desirable outcomes. Now, us as coaches, you as athletes as well out there, we're always looking for desirable outcomes, and we're always having different situations thrown at us. So again, it kind of sat really nicely. And given the essence that midway through my first cycle, we had once in 100-year pandemic start. So there were solutions needed, and hopefully desirable outcomes on that. It's a design that you kind of look at your own plan, strategic actions for change, but you're monitoring the problems. You're changing, reflecting, looking at the values, the consequences, and actually what's happening in your own environment. And again, that's why action research to sports coaches really makes sense. It's a really good vehicle of kind of getting at why you do practice. So methods of data collection and analysis. So participants, I was very lucky to have a coach that I work with very closely already, but within that kind of model, and the reason I wanted to get at collaboration was that often we work alongside coaches, but we don't always collaborate with them or take the time to actually work with them as much as we should. And it's actually structuring that time often to actually sit down and talk to them. So this coach, I great relationship with, and it was someone that I could sit down, talk to, but it got me thinking that often we don't always do that, even in our close environment. If you look at some of the environments that we used to coach in, say like those in Wales, NIAC, National Indoor Centre, or your own local track, there are probably coaches that you work around, or you work alongside, or you coach alongside, but how many times you sit down and challenge ideas, challenge why you do things. So that was my first participant. And then I talk about how when COVID came in, it changed the landscape and actually brought coaches outside of my current environment into the study. So it kind of developed in that. Baseline data, well, that was defining what creativity is to endurance running coaches. And that was actually with the coach that I started the study with, us talking about, creativity is quite personal. It's something that you can talk about and understand, but it's also individual to the event group, individual to you, in terms of what's going on. So, it's not, creativity isn't just a line in the sand or, easily something that is just black and white. You know, there's many facets to creativity, but if you're looking at developing your own creativity or those around you, then having a baseline for what it looks like, or what your normal environment looks like, therefore understanding what might be creative to it. I think that was really important, just getting an understanding of it and what it looked like. Reflective log is a really important part of any action research, where us as coaches, we should be keeping reflective logs anyway. It's so important to think about, you know, that plan, do, review, that reflection of what is going on, and why, and the experiences, and actually opening up to the successes in coaching. If I was going to try, or my other coach was going to try new things from our discussions, that it had to be documented, and a reflective log is a really good way of doing that. These were written down, you know, into a diary. You could easily nowadays with technology use a audio to record that, or, you know, a video, whatever way you wanted to capture that data. So the chats themselves, so the discussions, so it was, you know, chatting about what we were doing, and then chatting about what we could put into practice in our next coaching sessions. So they were recorded, so I could go back later and transcribe them, and then look at the data that was actually in the themes that came across from those, with Brown and Clark, who have a kind of 6-step approach to looking for themes within data. Obviously doing interviews, and when you're talking for 45 minutes, an hour long, then there's a lot of data that's gathered. Therefore, you know, you're looking not for needles in a haystack, but you're looking for similarities and themes that kind of start to come out, and again, kind of start to look for patterns in what we do, why we do them, and start to look at the reasons why certain things have success and why certain things aren't, you know, as practical as they might be when you're discussing them. Within that, and we'll probably all have critical friends, and don't see that as a negative thing. Critical friends is a good thing. Within mine, it was my tutors, it was my own peers within my doctorate, it was other coaches and people that I talked to. So critical friends are people that are going to be honest with you, they're going to give you feedback, and you're not going to take their criticism the wrong way. And I think us as coaches, I think it's something that is hugely beneficial if we have those critical friends. Again, hopefully, like you, I want to keep developing, and therefore it's, you know, it's really important that we have those people in our environment. So ethical issues, obviously keeping it anonymous. I won't name any of the coaches I work with, and obviously keeping the data and information that gathered nicely secure, and obviously just being, you know, considerate that, you know, within the reasons of creativity in the sessions, that they weren't detriment to the athletes, and ultimately we still want the athletes to perform. So, you know, pointless doing something just to be creative within the study if it wasn't going to be effective for the athletes themselves. So first cycle, data collection, and obviously understanding and looking at the personal and collaborative start points. So the first 3 weeks, this was just before COVID kind of came along, or it was there, but we weren't on a lockdown. So myself and Coach A, we were planning things, we were putting things into practice, and just simple little things that were starting to come out in us thinking about being creative. So, you know, things in terms of where we could be creative in training sessions. So for us, one of the most obvious ones was the warm-up. So, you know, it gave us a vehicle that we could try things in the warm-up. For example, we use things like skipping ropes. We use things like certain drills that we hadn't done previously. Reason being, going back to the point about the ethics or not impacting the session, that we wanted to test things and do things, but obviously not impact, you know, the main body or what was, you know, the function of the session. And that's what we always are as coaches, probably, you know, under a challenge of what can we change, but without impacting, you know, the actual, you know, meat and potatoes of a session, or the fundamentals of a session. It's really important that you obviously keep those and where you can tweak. Now, warm-up was a great example of that. We know ourselves that athletes sometimes get a bit lazy in warm-ups, or their warm-ups can be a little bit mundane. So something where throwing in things like skipping ropes, and there was a fundamental reason for that in terms of improving ground contact, but also giving them a different tool to use. And we saw, you know, really good kind of cycle, feedback from that. So, you know, it was interesting to see that, putting that into the logs, and actually recalling that within the cycle of, you know, what we were doing, observing the training sessions, and as much the reaction of the athletes to what their feedback was, because just because our perception is it's going well, but it's that perception of what the athletes are kind of feeling, and also the fact that it was not just me putting it into practice, but another coach getting involved and actually putting these things into practice, but also talking about why we're doing things. And that was important to come back and talk about what we were thinking about, where they were coming from, and what that might look down. COVID-19 intervened. Now, this was a critical moment where the environment changed, from what we were used to, and I think, even prior to that, there were little snippets where, for example, I was coaching a Spanish athlete that went back to Spain, and they were on a different lockdown to us. So their lockdown involved them being locked at home, where they weren't able to go out and exercise. So everything had to be done in their home location. Now, when my Spanish athlete went home, they had no access to any equipment in the house. So you start to think about, and discussions, with other coaches, and things came up about what, online exercises they could do. But also another thing that came up was, there was a book about prison workouts and doing workouts from your prison cell. So even the extremes of something, like COVID, you have to start thinking, go back to that thinking outside the box, and start to think about, how can you coach now, given that the environment that you had just 2 days before is totally different. So it really does challenge us. Now, I had quite a lot of coaches contact myself during the start of lockdown to look at exploring collaborating together. And this created the second cycle where 2 other coaches, looked to collaborate and share ideas. And this fed into the second cycle of online discussions that we're now accustomed to now, because we're doing another webinar. And it was what we were doing, how we were doing it, the current situation. And so we've gone from skipping ropes to suddenly, the change of our norm of coaching. So the experiences that we were having, the experiences that we were trying to get our athletes to respond to, and these reflections helped the second cycle, and this collaboration helped to foster creativity. But yeah, it was the engagement and the situation kind of gave urgency and need to the importance of being creative. It fast-tracked something where, not being creative or being creative was something that was myself and the first coach sitting down thinking, how can we be creative? What can we be creative with? COVID-19 made us, and I think you'll probably all agree, as athletes, as coaches, it forced our hand to be creative, because to do what we need to do, or to change the way that we actually did things previously, we basically had to be creative. So results of the kind of the discussions that, from the feedback from athletes, the understanding from the other coaches was, it started to give really good feel. And I think the understanding that the new ideas gave, I think whatever the new way of being creative is, it got athletes to think about why they did things. Something as simple, of changing the way they warm up, got athletes to think about why they did things. And I think that was a fundamental kind of thing, theme throughout. It gave athletes a deeper understanding to tasks, and a different feel. Even doing a drill slightly differently, walking backwards drills, for example, is going to get the athletes thinking about why they do something. And then also you can challenge athletes with feedback, as opposed to us always doing the same. But also that feedback, the creative coaching within coaches ourselves. If we're doing something differently, or we're going to do something differently, and why we're going to do it, talking to another coach about why you might do something differently, where it's come from in terms of another source, it's something you've seen, something you've read, but then that justification and going and trying it. I think that was really important. So, and it was evident that learning was happening through development of skill, but also speaking to the athletes about them understanding why they were doing something different. That was really important as well, that the athletes shared and collaborated in the journey as well. So keep it simple. I think, again, going back to the ideas themselves, they might seem new ideas, but they've probably come from something else. It's the situation or the way that we put them into play, or how we use them or how we develop them that kind of makes them look new. But pretty much it's not, groundbreaking. Skipping isn't groundbreaking for a boxer. That's second nature to them. Walking backwards drills to another coach or another running group is the norm. But so it's understanding that most things are borrowed from other people. Most things come from the internet nowadays. So, and I think it's not being afraid of that. And I think it's being that, it doesn't have to be life-changing or groundbreaking or revolutionary, but where you use it can have really good kind of benefits. So keeping it simple. So COVID, obviously, the online responses, the coaching kind of environment, and the way that coaches look to problem solve through this and creative and think creatively through that was about us problem solving. And that's pretty much what we do as coaching. We're problem solving most of the time, and we're thinking about our ability to think about what's happening and move from that. I think one of the big things that's come through this is the platforms that we have available now in the 21st century, where we have social media platforms to interact with athletes, webinars, we're doing that right now, Zoom meetings, where people were doing things like S&C, physiotherapy. They were just doing chatting, groups having just a group chat amongst training groups, just to get that interaction, the social side of being in a training group. YouTube videos, I was using my own YouTube channel for an online circuit, Monday, Wednesday, that built up a great community, and it was a resource that athletes or anyone could go to, but again, being part of the community. And then all of us, maybe, or some of us, had experience of virtual racing, so obviously downloading platforms, racing up and down industrial estates or around your street, and all examples and things, kind of things that were shared amongst coaches about things that were working, certain training sessions, ways of doing things like the Cooper test, which is running for 12 minutes and measuring the distance. That this sharing of ideas, the creative thinking about what they could do, using of books in bags for weights, stepping up onto different platforms that are not your normal platforms, using milk cartons or milk crates with water in as weights. So all of the ways that we kind of were thinking about how we needed to change what we did, because no one could get into gyms, no one or not everyone had access to weights at home, and our training environments, tracks as well, pretty much all athletics tracks are out. So what could you do in that environment? And talking about different ways that people maximize and change the way that they thought about doing things. So some of the key themes that kind of came out from the data, I think the way that we're looking always to develop our own environments. The environmental factors were fundamental. So in terms of collaboration, and a lot of it's down to our networking, which I talked about earlier, where we probably have good networking, but we maybe don't always use it. So it's thinking about the networking we have and that ability to collaborate. Now, nowadays, I think really importantly, that networking does not have to mean that people need to be alongside you in the physical sense of it. That nowadays, and especially in the second cycle, that coaches reaching out. There was a coach in the Northeast, a coach in the South of England that I was networking with and collaborating with. There's coaches across the seas in America, in Spain, that gathering information, gathering data. So networking now is global. It's not just something that we are just networking within our own close proximity. But I think that we always, we work well with people that we have common ground with, and therefore working with those people that you have a common goal. And often, that might be obviously working with other endurance coaches in the same environment with, or have the same level of athletes. It might be the same age group of athletes. But also, with us, we all had the common ground of we were dealing with COVID-19. So that was the common ground, and we still have that common ground. So use your networking and collaborate. So that dialogue, the talking between coaches, what you will find is, and I think one of the things that we found as coaches working with each other, we all had the same problems. We all had the same kind of fears about what were going on. And it actually gave us a real nice kind of community where talking with other coaches, you're sharing your problems, you're sharing your ideas, and And don't be too precious about your own ideas or about things that you're going to try. Share them, because someone else is probably thinking about doing the same thing or hasn't thought about it, but you could be helping them. So that dialogue and develop a new or existing relationship. Motivation, I mean, motivation as coaches, if we're looking to improve, then that motivation is important, but the collaboration part of it as well, keeping it as wanting to be motivated to collaborate. But obviously, if you know the benefits and you've seen the benefits of collaboration, then you're going to want to collaborate and keep that collaboration going further. And obviously, an enjoyment, satisfaction, challenge from the external pressures. That's coaching, guys, isn't it? We're going to have external pressures on there, but hopefully, yeah, you're motivated by the challenge itself. So, and obviously, problem solving, risk taking was quite important. Putting things into practice, and some risks that we took or some things that we put into practice over COVID didn't pay off, others did. Going into a new cycle, where we might not have the same level of competition again or the same level of facilities, we're in the same boat again. So it's continuing to maybe take some risks, and that's ultimately what we're doing as coaches. We're pushing the envelope, and influence from previous experiences, and us learning as athletes, coaches. And that's can be social, it can be material things that happen as well. Some results we've had that have gone well, others they haven't. Feedback from athletes as well has gone well, others have lost motivation. How can we develop that further? And again, that sharing of experiences, the dialogue, and it really gives that social content that we're people, we're coaches, we're not going to get it right all the time, often we get it wrong, but yeah, how we want to keep developing those real life interactions, and obviously developing our confidence in that. And then lastly, the kind of openness to new ideas. Obviously, we want to be open as coaches. During the second cycle, it was about sharing experiences, supported, in working those ideas. Interesting themes between that was the trust that we have between our athletes. Now, trying new ideas, trust is really important. That you want to get that trust within your training groups, that you can try things and the athletes will believe what you do, but also that you can have that environment to mix things up and get the desired the desired effect, but also trust your interaction with other coaches and collaborate. I think that's really important, that you want that trust to be two ways between you and the coach and the other coaches and you and the athletes, and that positive relationship is really important. And fear is fear of failure is something that's often there. But it's accepting that that's part of coaching, and that's probably what makes you a good coach. If you do have that slight fear of failure and risk taking, there are things that probably could be expanded on for their study of their own, risk taking and fear themselves. So in conclusion, for us, I would love us or you to take away some of the fundamentals that creative ideas can be planned and unplanned. They can be small sparks, but hopefully they can influence things. They can be influenced on things you've seen, you've heard, you've read, and obviously working with other coaches in that collaboration, and using technology. Now, technology tools to support us, and it's not being afraid of them. Coaches are far and near to us, and obviously coaching drives creativity. So, collaboration of coaches is just going to make us better and more creative. And obviously during the start, it shaped our practice, but hopefully now confidence and experience. We've all been through the first cycle of COVID, so let's keep sharing what worked, in those webinars, in those Zoom sessions, what worked with your group. If we go into another lockdown, what did you do practically to maintain the kind of mental and physical elements that we want our athletes to have. And it's acknowledged that, yeah, we're going to take risks and we're not always going to get it right first time. We know that. What does this mean? Future implications. I would love NGBs to pick this up, keep exploring, obviously pushing, the collaborative, creative element of, working as networks of coaches, and taking away that understanding that you're born creative or you're just a creative person on your own, that everyone can be creative. There's no excuses with technology. Everyone's got a phone. You're on a laptop or some web-based platform, so you have information out there to collaborate. Technology obviously has a great way of now dealing with creative ideas, delivering sessions, and obviously, what is normal anymore. Some of the limitations, obviously, it was my own research, it was on me, some of it, so it could be biased in there. Hopefully you've seen within this some of the experiences that you've had as coaches, and obviously, you know, underlying the importance of colleagues, external pressures, but there's always, whenever you're studying your own practice, there's always going to be an underlying bias, I'm sure. But that's why I challenge you to go out into your own environments and test your own creativity. And yeah, let's start being creative and collaborative as much as we can, especially in this new age that we're in of COVID-19. I would love it to be over sooner rather than later, but I think we're looking at least another 6 months, potentially longer, of that. So there you go. So need to be positive in terms of goals. Otherwise, you know, why keep going? Creativity is one of those. Finishing with a nice quote to finish us off. And therefore, yeah, why be creative? That's just one of those reasons. Hopefully it provides a bit more of an exciting model of us living, coaching, and obviously you know, being part of those training sessions as athletes themselves. So any references on requests, I was going to put it on there, but it's a lot of references. So any of the references that I've used throughout today's presentation, let me know and I will ping you the full reference list or the individual reference. I'll get Welsh Athletics can obviously have a copy of this presentation as well. Obviously, it's there pre-recorded to go back and pick up at any time that you want to, or pass on. There's an option now if there's any questions from anyone. I think that there's the question box to type away if there is any questions. I'm going to be here for the next couple of minutes, but again, hugely grateful for your time for listening. Massive thank you to my athletes, the team, the athletes, those athletes from Cardiff Met University, my Cardiff Met tutors and colleagues, my peers in my group for being great critical friends. British Milers Club, huge amount of support from those helping to fund my Talk Doctorate, and Welsh Athletics giving me this platform to speak with you this evening. And hopefully that's given you a little bit of a flavour of creativity, of collaboration, and maybe hopefully I'd love it to give you a bit more confidence going in to the next cycle of training. Now we're into winter training. I can't see any questions flashing up on the box, so that means that obviously I've answered all of your questions during this. So I think that it's a case of yourselves, being confident in what you're doing. Go and collaborate with those that are local to you, those that are international to you. It's a push of a button away. I'm here if you want to ping me any questions anytime. jthie@cardiffmet.ac.uk or jamesthie@hotmail.com. Find me on social media @Team Thie. I would love to help you if it's an element of creativity, of collaboration, of both. You know, and I think that go forth, go and have a fantastic winter, and hopefully we have a more positive outcome in the future. But yeah, thank you very much, Liz. Thank you very much to the Welsh Athletics team, for Zoe, for allowing me this time today. So go and have a fantastic evening, everybody. And thank you for having me tonight on the next Welsh Athletics webinar. So I've been James Thie, and this has been about creativity and collaboration in endurance running coaches. So goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much for listening.